it again. We're going back to Omaha. And it's on to the College World Series Final. The 2015 National Champions.
It is the last week of January, and that means in Charlottesville, it's the start of baseball season. Welcome into another season of 1186, the podcast. I am Damon Dillman, joined by Andrew Ramspacker, and joined this week by the head baseball coach at UVA, Brian O'Connor, as the Who's start turning their attention toward Valentine's Day and the season opener in Puerto Rico against Michigan. So we've got a lot to talk about. Obviously, we've already started rolling into baseball season here a little bit. You had, let's see, what have we had lately? We had the ring ceremony for last year's team. We had the reunion of the 2015 team. We have Meet the Team Day coming up on Sunday at JPJ. That's 3:30 at JPJ. We'll get into that a little later. And practices have started as well for the Who's as they get ready for opening day. So, and preseason rankings are coming out too now. Oak, Andrew and I both listened to your media availability from earlier this week as practice gets rolling. And you talked a little bit about being number 2 in the country, according to D1Baseball.com. So I was going to start there. You said, bring it on. You were channeling your inner Brandon Geyer there when you were talking about your reaction to being number 2. When you delivered that message to the team, when that's your approach, what kind of reaction does that get from the team when they hear that that's how you're approaching it?
Well, certainly the preseason rankings are great, right? And there's positive things that come from that. For example, I think we've already, broken our season ticket record already for season ticket sales, right? And so people are excited in the community to come out and watch this team. What the rankings are is it's different publications, as you guys know, that just base it off of what's returning and what's the new incoming talent and compared to your peers across the country. And, certainly it's exciting. It speaks to, the ability level we have in our ball club, but I don't ever shy away from it. I don't believe in downplaying it, right? It is what it is, but continue to talk to the team and go about our business the right way, that it's just a number, and everything that you do throughout the year is you earn what you get at the end of the year. So, again, it's really nice. It creates hype and excitement around the start of the year, but it comes down to, how do you play on Valentine's Day against Michigan and Puerto Rico? And then how do you play the next day? And how does your team grow throughout the year? You want to be a high-ranked team at the end of the year, but it is nice that people out there in the baseball community feel like we've got a pretty good team.
Is that a very brief conversation with the team, the ranking stuff, like when it is particularly high?
Well, it is. You address it, and we talked about it. And I even talked to the team prior to going home for a holiday break, that when they're home for the holidays, there's going to start to be some rankings that are going to come out, and that it's nice, okay, that people feel that you have a good team. But the reality is, it doesn't mean a whole lot to going out on the field and winning the games. And they understand that. And then there's some times, Andrew, that maybe you don't have the best practice or a session in practice, and you raise your voice as the coach and remind them that everything that we get as a team, we earn. And it doesn't matter what people say about you or write about you. You go out, not that you're ever trying to defend a ranking or anything, but you go out and you earn everything that you get throughout the season. Hey, listen, we all know, following college athletics, there's been a lot of teams that have been ranked the number 1 team in the country in the preseason, and they're nowhere near that at the end of the year. Our team understands that. We've got really good leadership, and they understand that it's going out and earning that on the field every day.
One of the other things that jumped out to me when you were talking to the media earlier this week was whether it was trying to decide the left side of the infield, whether it was trying to figure out how you're going to make it work in the outfield. Just you're rattling off all of these names, whether it's Harrison Didowick, Aiden Teal, Nunnally, Becker, and Hansen, and the left side of the infield. It's just, there's so much depth to this lineup going into this season. From your perspective, I know. How do you you've encountered this before? What have you learned about managing that depth and finding ways to just, I mean, for lack of a better way of putting it, making it work?
Yeah, that's a great question, Damon. First and foremost, the players, the best teams are a player-led team, right? And they have to understand that it is a competitive environment amongst each other, right? But that everybody has a role, right? And you could look at last year, and a great example of last year is, hey, Aiden Teal could have played more last year as a position player. Luke Hansen and Eric Becker could have played more than they did last year. But when you have an approach as a team that it's what's ever best for the team and the group first, when you take that approach as an individual and as a team member, it works out how it should work out. Certainly, it's great to have options and different combinations, and we do have that. We do have a significant amount of options, and I just believe throughout a season that plays out, and it gives your team the best chance to win. And when you recruit unselfish team-first players, then it ends out coming back to them, right? A great example is, basically Luke Hansen and Eric Becker split time at third base last year. And there were a lot of programs in America that they could have played every day. And they were unselfish teammates that understood the situation. And, now they're better players this year, and good things happen to good teammates that put what's the best for the group at the forefront. And we've just I take a lot of pride in that, and our players do too. And when you do that, you end up having a great team, and they end out playing where they should.
You have had numerous. You've talked about throughout your time and we've asked these questions, particularly when it comes to like your pitching rotation and setting your pitching rotation, and whether it was Coach K's or whether it's Coach Drew now, right? Like there's, obviously Damon's favorite scene from 1186. The only one that doesn't that we did. Andrew. Yeah, where you move the index cards around, right? Which was a real life scene that you guys did in the clubhouse, trying to figure out the rotation for that postseason. You've talked about that. I don't know if we've ever asked you specifically about the other side and lineup construction. And what are those conversations like with Coach Mack through the years, obviously with Coach Kirby, his input? How have you done that through the years, particularly like last year and then this year with all the options and moving pieces?
Well, it's conversations throughout the fall, and more of those conversations right now, right, on starting to put pieces together how you think that it might play out, at least at the beginning of the year. And then you adjust and adapt throughout the year based on their performance and what kind of results you're seeing in a lineup. I keep a depth chart on my computer throughout the fall and then the preseason and during the season on, different combinations. Where do we think are the guys play the best in the field, and lineup construction. And, even this morning in our staff meeting that we have every day at 10 a.m., we talked a little bit about, where guys might profile the best in the lineup, on protecting some players, who's hitting behind them, where do you want spots to be able to run more in the lineup and things like that. So it's a constant conversation based off their performance on the field. Hey guys, they're still out there competing every day in our scrimmages for us to decide what combinations are going to be the best for us to start this season off. And then that evolves throughout the season. It never stays the same throughout the year. You take a look at different combinations and what's the best thing to do based on their performance. And that's fun. You enjoy that. I actually had a meeting yesterday with Coach Dickinson, about the pitching and how we see this laying out the opening weekend, and, different combinations, who should pitch against who based on who your opponent is. And so that's a constant thing we're always doing. And that's part of our job, is to put our team in the best position every game to try to win that ball game in front of them.
Kind of following up on that, but you mentioned the scrimmages that are going on now. Can you think back in your time here? any of those preseason position battles, guys fighting for like shortstop or third base or whatever. And it was just a really heated, intense competition, both guys playing at a high level. And ultimately, in the long run, everybody benefited from that really heated competition now.
Yeah, I mean, some years it's, hey, listen, we went into this time last year and we knew Griffo Farrell was going to be our shortstop, right? And you know some things in some positions, right? For example, right now, Harrison Didewick and Aiden Teal are still, they're both working out in center field, with a sprinkle little bit in left field and things like that. That's good because you also don't know what the season's going to bring you from, injury standpoint and things like that. So it behooves you this time of the year to take a look at guys in different positions, right? Because you just don't know what's going to happen throughout the year, and it gives them a little bit of experience. So, I mean, there's countless, back to Chris Taylor, when he was competing at shortstop as a freshman, right? But you make the decision about a week before the start of the season that he's going to end up playing right field the opening weekend. And then as the season goes along, some things happen and he ends out winning the shortstop job, right? So, I just believe in the fall and the preseason, trying to move guys around a little bit in preparation of you don't know what's going to happen from one week to the next. And so it's fun, it mixes it up for them a little bit. And, but listen, you brought up the most important word, competition, competing, right? They need to know that nothing's handed to them. Everything is earned. And when you create a competitive environment and practice every day, when it's game time, they'll know that they'll be prepared to have success on the field. And there's been a lot of years where you've had a player just have an unbelievable fall and you think that you have something there, and then the spring rolls around and now the games really matter and the pressure ticks up a little bit, they might not perform at the same level, right? And so, looking at a bunch of different options is important.
Griffo Farrell, like you said, is kind of he was your the one you least worried about, right? Particularly at that position for basically the last 3 seasons. Your shortstops, I looked this up. Your 7 starting shortstops of your College World Series teams: Tyler Cannon, Chris Taylor, Danny Pinero twice, Nick Kent, Griffo Farrell twice. You've done pretty good of picking out some pretty. Those are some Hall of Famers in your program, some All Americans, All ACC guys. Obviously, that competition is open again. You mentioned Eric Becker as a guy could be a significant candidate amongst others. What do you look for in that position? Going into the season, and what traits do you look for that position? Because obviously you've nailed some really good ones, particularly on your best teams.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, you need to have somebody at shortstop that can make the everyday play. Everybody loves the highlight reel play at shortstop, the backhand in the hole and throws the guy out, and that's great, right? But who is going to make the steady everyday play, the routine play, turn the double play, handle the ball at a high level consistently is really important, okay? And so, unfortunately, we have a lot of guys that I think that can do that on this year's team. Some things have happened throughout the fall that some guys had some injury things and they couldn't really compete there like they wanted to compete. But then the other factor into it, Andrew, as well is, you might have somebody you think is the best shortstop, but what's going on at second base and third base are equally as important, right? And so the shortstop position gets a lot of play and press, but second base and third base, especially third base in college baseball, because of the bunt, is so important. So I actually look at it as the 3 positions. What is the best combination between the 3 positions? Somebody might be better off at shortstop than they are at third base. Okay. So you don't necessarily always say, hey, the best shortstop is going to play shortstop, and then we move from there. I always look at the three positions. What is the best combination of the three for us to have the best total infield defense?
Another aspect when you're talking about Griff O'Farrell is just, and you talked about this earlier in the week, but the leadership, and kind of the void. I don't know if void's the right word, because it always seems like we have this conversation every year that there's somebody new ready to step into that role in this program. It's just kind of how it works in this program. Who do you see as maybe elevating into more of that role this year?
Well, that's a great question, because guys like Griff O'Farrell and Anthony Stefan and, Ethan Anderson, Casey Sauke, guys like that were in the program for 3 years, they developed into great leaders in our program. And, somebody else was doing that prior to them moving into that role. And if you develop high school players, and they continue to move along in your program, and as they matriculate through it, they then take on the responsibility of more of a vocal voice. And it's not necessarily always the guy that is the yeller and screamer and motivating guys. It's more the player that goes about his business the right way on a consistent basis, right? And so we're fortunate in this program to have a lot of guys that do that. It's been over a decade, guys, that we've named captains in our program. And that's purposeful of why we no longer do that, because to have a great player-led team, you need a lot of leaders in that clubhouse. They should all be leaders in their own individual way. But you see the emergence of Luke Hansen, that has done some really good things for 2 years and goes about his business the right way. He's somebody that's doing a nice job. Harrison Didewick, Aiden Teal, there's a lot of them, Godbout in his way, Becker, Henry Ford, Jacob Ferentz now playing that position here now in his second year is a vital leadership guy, and then on the pitching mound, Jack O'Connor and Evan Blanco, Dean Camp Score is somebody that throughout his career gets it and understands and values what this program is about, and has shown a nice voice in our clubhouse of what the Virginia baseball program is about and holding his teammates to a high standard. So fortunately, there's been a number of them that throughout the 5 months we've been together have really stepped forward and driven home the standards of our baseball program.
When you were talking about Griff O'Farrell and the leadership he provided and the void there, but the other day, Dave and I were just talking about how, like, your 2015 team, obviously we were just at the 10-year reunion a couple of weeks ago. Who was that a player run? Was there a single guy that you think of that had the most? I mean, we thought Brandon Waddell was my big candidate. Obviously Kenny too as a senior, but was there a guy? Was that kind of spread out?
It was spread out, and that's what I'm talking about. Is that team didn't have that team didn't have captains, right? And a lot of them in their own way were great leaders on that ball club. Joe McCarthy, Kevin Doherty was a big leader on that team. Kenny Towns, obviously. There were a number of first years that played key roles on that team, but some of those veteran guys, Robbie Coleman, Matt Thice, certainly, Waddell did, Josh Spores in his own way. So I just really, really believe in that concept that they all have to lead in their own way. And then when they value that, even as a first year, and they start to learn that they have a voice, well, that's how you develop leaders in your program, rather than just waiting until their third or fourth year. If they're leading in some way and holding people to our standards, even if they're 18 years old, they can lead in some way and then emerge to have a bigger voice as they matriculate through the program. So, a lot of those guys did. And listen, we all know the story of that 2015 team and all the challenges that they endured throughout the year. That's what leadership does, right? I can stand in front of them and profess what I do, but the reality is it comes down to the conversations that are had in the clubhouse between them and the conversations where they live, right? Whether it be in the dorm or their apartment, the conversations they're having amongst each other are the most important.
How do you feel about the pitching depth going into this year?
Great.
Because it seems like, yeah, I think you should. When you look at the roster and some of the guys you brought in, and just hearing the way you talk about some of these pitchers, and obviously when you bring a guy like Wolfick back, when you have a guy like Blanco back, and the experience both of those guys had, especially in June last year, but throughout the course of the year, how to have that foundation. And again, going back to the previous conversation about how are all these puzzle pieces going to fit together throughout the course of the spring and into the summer, but how nice is it to sort of have that foundation in place?
Well, Damon, it's the most important, right? We all want a great lineup, and that's awesome because you feel like you're never out of a game with a great lineup, and you feel like you can extend leads with a great lineup. But to have the kind of season that we want to have, it starts with pitching and defense. We've got to play consistent play on the infield. We've got to handle the ball behind the plate with our catcher, and we've got to be really good and consistent on the mound, right? And when you return a Jay Woolfolk, when you return an Evan Blanco, we return a number of guys out of the bullpen, and then the emergence of some others, right? Bryson Moore and the development of him, Kevin Jacksel, getting back to pitching how he's capable of pitching, right? The emergence of Ryan Osinski, who was a second year in our program last year, and this is he's a third year, but it's his second year in our program this year. The experience that they gained, Matt Augustin, right on down the line, there's a number of them. Blake Barker, Dean Campshore, Matt Buchanan, I could keep naming them off. I'm excited about the depth of this pitching staff and the development that we're going to see throughout. We'll get a shot in the arm at some point this spring where we'll get Jack O'Connor and Bradley Hodges back, and that'll be some nice reinforcements to prop up our pitching staff even more. And then, we're going to have the opportunity before we start ACC play to get really good looks at guys, because anytime you're in the preseason, you're going to have some pitchers that are behind other guys. The preseason throwing programs don't go the same for everybody. So there's going to be some pitchers that are not going to be ready to pitch the first weekend because they might have had a snag in their preseason pitching program, and what that does is it creates opportunities early on for other guys and creates depth in the pitching staff and make us stronger as the year goes on. So, there's a handful of guys that won't be ready for the first weekend, and that happens all over college baseball, but that's okay because when they are back at 100% and catch up in the throwing protocol, then that'll make the depth of the pitching staff even better.
Brian, last year you had, I felt like Jay went through like two phases, right? Like there was the regular season Jay, and then there was the postseason Jay, where he was one of your main reasons really that got you, to the College World Series with his performances, in your own backyard there, particularly that one against Mississippi State. This was his second full offseason, right? Without football. Any differences that you've seen from him this offseason compared to the last one that maybe gets him a more consistent approach throughout the year?
Well, Andrew, thanks for acknowledging we wouldn't have been in Omaha if it wasn't for Jay Woolfolk's performances in the postseason last year. That's for sure. I mean, he majorly stepped up and was determined to make a difference in us getting there, and no better example than that outing against Mississippi State in our own ballpark. But, he had a really good fall. He pitched this fall like he did at the end of the year last year, and that was great to see. Jay Woolfolk came back to the University of Virginia, one, to graduate from the university, but two, to accomplish something great. And he knows his part. He's a very determined young man, and I love the way that he's been pitching in the preseason here, and obviously is going to be a key guy for us to be successful and be one of those anchors of that pitching staff. And I believe with every fiber in my body that he's going to do that and have a great season for us. And because he's very, very determined. He's back here with a purpose, and I believe that that's going to play out for the young man and for our team this spring. And huge shot in our arm to get him back, and looking forward to seeing him getting out there and competing that opening weekend.
Your freshman players, your first-year players, you have not been shy about kind of talking up some particular names in that class, not only being a big one. What have you seen from those guys, and why, I guess, maybe, I don't know if bold's the right word, but you sound pretty confident in a lot of those guys. Is that a thing that you've done in the past with first-year players? I mean, kind of giving them that confidence if they've earned it through the fall? Like, what do you see from them?
Yeah, I have. There's been players before, certainly, that, going into the season, because partially how they performed in the fall, but it's also the things they say and how they respond when things don't go well. The younger player that is a quick learner and is able to take the information and apply it quickly, and that doesn't sit around and feel sorry for himself, right? And adheres to the standards pretty quickly, and they've got talent, you get pretty excited about those players. And whether, you need, at this level in college baseball, you need freshmen to step in, right? And perform right away. And some of them, Andrew, get overshadowed when you do have an experienced team back like we do this year. So there's a lot more that I would be and could talk about. But the challenge is we do have a more veteran and experienced team. So, obviously, I've spoken a lot about James Nunnally because of how he performed in the fall and how he goes about his business. Jackson Soroy is an infielder that is going to be a great player in our program. He can play anywhere on the infield. He reminds a lot of people of Griff O'Farrell, right? And he's a high energy, very talented player. Sean James is a player first year that, can play the infield for us, can catch. That guy, so far since he's been here, he's hit 4 home runs the opposite way in our ballpark in scrimmages. That's pretty rare to be able to do that. He's a talented, skilled player that is going to do great things in our program. I've talked about Tomas Valinkis, and, he's earned the opportunities that he's going to have because the guy's a fierce competitor. He wants the ball, and he is highly talented. And I believe that, he's going to make a huge impact for us on the mound, as well as others. Aiden Harris in our scrimmages, who's a young freshman hitter for us, plays the infield, plays the outfield, has had some really, really great at-bats in this preseason, and so, other guys too. So, I hate to just single out a few of them, but there's a number of them that have the talent and skill to play in this program.
All right, before we let you go, I've got a trivia question for you. But before we get to that, I know we mentioned it off the top, but coming up Sunday afternoon, 3:30 at JPJ's Meet the Team Day. For my son, for Jacob, it's a chance to see his favorite player, Coach Kirby. His favorite baseball player of all time. Yes. But how much
number one in your program and your hearts, right?
Yeah, at least in one heart. Yeah, his favorite football player is AJ Brown. His favorite baseball player, Coach Kirby. So. But I mean, just the opportunity to, combo. And I know it happens a lot of times after the Sunday ACC games and the autograph sessions, but just to be able to interact with the community, how much does that mean to the guys and just to the program?
Well, Damon, it's so important. We have valued in our baseball program for over 2 decades the relationship with this community, right? And we intentionally do things for the youth in this community, for the elderly in this community, to provide them an opportunity to come out and watch baseball, in the spring. And so it's a big part of what we've done to develop our program, right? There's winning on the field and there's recruiting and all of that. And you need all of that, but community engagement is incredibly important. If you want people in this stadium cheering you on and have a great atmosphere in the dish, the community outreach is vitally important. So doing something like Meet the Team Day like we have on Sunday, every Sunday, the youth in our community being able to come on the field and get autographs and interact with our players. We've always done that and we'll continue to do that. And so that's important. It's important for the young people in our community, but it's just as important for our players, right? To interact with people, to give back, right, to this community that has given our baseball program so much. And, the initiative that we started 3 years ago with 18 and under free in this stadium, you wonder why our attendance has skyrocketed in this program for three years. That's a big reason why. And so there's a lot of people in this community that feel a connection to what our young men are doing, and we're very, very proud of that.
All right. Before we let you go, like I said, I've got a quick trivia question for you. I'm going to throw a date at you. April 5th, 2006, which is almost 20 years ago. It's wild. But Ryan Zimmerman, friend of the program, friend of the podcast, Ryan Zimmerman hit his first career major league home run on that date. I'm interested to see if you know this. Who did he hit that home run off of?
No idea.
It's really? Give him a hint. The guy's he was in the news as of what?
Yeah, he recently made some news. He
hit it off Billy Wagner?
He did. Yeah, he hit it off Billy Wagner. Blown save for Billy Wagner with the Mets, April 5th, 2006.
No
good to know for your blog. Yeah. No, but wow. I thought I wanted to bring that up because obviously there are lots of connections. You have the personal connection now with Dylan pitching for Billy out at Miller. But also I remember talking to Billy one time and he brought up the story of he came to step up the plate one year early in your time here. And because he used to throw to your guys, right? When he was getting ready to go to spring training. He said he came to step up to the plate and you guys just kept showing that same highlight of Zim taking him deep for his first career home run over and over at step up to the plate. So, but I thought it was an opportunity to get your thoughts on just seeing him get elected to the Hall of Fame. And he obviously has a couple of connections now to this program and to your family. So just your reaction to all of that.
Well, I'm really excited for Billy and his family. This was long overdue. Billy Wagner is one of those treasures that we have in this community, and we're incredibly fortunate to have him and his family in this community, to have a baseball Hall of Famer here. But what Billy and his wife have done for Charlottesville, the things that they support, what they've done out at the Miller School, and how they've supported that school and this entire community is really, really impressive. And, just really elated for him. He did, before he'd go to spring training, he'd come out here in our preseason and he would throw in our scrimmage games. And I remember Corey Hunt hitting one right back at him, right over his head, And so he'd always get his tune-ups with us before he'd head to spring training. Has been a friend of our program for 2 decades, and just really excited for him. I talked to him the other day on the phone when he was in New York, and I just couldn't imagine, they wait in his final year on the ballot, 10th year on the ballot. They waited to announce him last. I mean, there's, last year, 3 votes shy of the Hall of Fame. I'm just so happy for him. He earned it, right? I don't know what it took. I don't want to be critical, but I'm not sure why it took 10 years to induct the greatest left-handed reliever in all time in baseball into the Hall of Fame. But the guy earned it. He was a warrior. He was a serious competitor. What an unbelievable story, his background to ultimately get to the major leagues and have his career that he did. Really, really cool, and excited for him and his family.
There you go. That seems like a pretty good place to wrap things up. I want to thank everybody for joining us here on 1186, the podcast. For Andrew, for Oak, I'm Damon. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.